Ever since the world was born at the beginning of chaos, the Heavenly Dao has appeared. It controlled the laws of heaven and earth and also changed everything. Under the rule of the Heavenly Dao, the world has gone through two great cycles. During the first cycle, thousands of people painstakingly trained and cultivated to reach the realm beyond the Heavenly Dao. They also developed endurance, strength of spirit and will, entered into a trance with the help of meditations. But nevertheless, people were too greedy. They not only selfishly stole the spiritual roots of heaven and earth, but also arrogantly tried to claim that they were representatives of the Heavenly Dao. From this self-will and greed of the world, having awakened, the heavens became disillusioned with everything that exists. They couldn't allow such disgusting mortals to continue living, so they destroyed all the creatures. During the second cycle, three worlds were identified: heavenly, human and earthly. They split into regions and were no longer the same. The west was under the control of powerful gods, the east was ruled by majestic immortals, and the earthly world was deserted and quickly turned into a frightening wasteland. The pile of bones reached the height of the most majestic mountains, and the souls of criminals turned into ghosts. The human world was somewhere between the mighty kingdom of heaven and the kingdom of earth, better known as the place where the weak fall into the cycle of reincarnation. However, the strongest representatives of the first great cycle were not completely destroyed. Some of them have been reborn into humans and are hiding to this day. And some of the dead have returned to life, but remain undercover in the world of the living, trying not to catch anyone's eye. Whatever it was, they all have the same goal: to enter the path of fate and challenge the Heavenly Dao. After awakening, the Heavenly Dao was furious at this turn of events, so it unleashed its anger in the form of the most powerful thunder. For the second time, the planet was already destroyed. Currently, the world has entered the third great cycle, and several tens of thousands of years have passed since those events. The story ends there, as the young man orders the narrating sphere to be silenced. In some disbelief, he clarifies his status, the status of the Heavenly Dao. Having made sure that he is really endowed with new powers, the man abruptly and confidently jumps down from a decent hill, continuing his journey with his head held high. He became a Heavenly Dao with unlimited power, who was chosen by the system. In the mountains, under the scorching sun, travelers slowly step. The man standing in front of everyone pauses and looks with obvious surprise at the stranger who stands in his way and talks to himself. And this is just a new Dao going on, continuing to ask the sphere about the previous Heavenly Dao and why he used only force in solving his problems. Tao does not notice anyone around him. He goes on to claim that force cannot solve all problems, as it can only help against enemies. As an argument, he cites Zun's words that the strong use force against the stronger, and the weak against the weaker. Tao is sure that he is not a former Heavenly Dao, so he will never make such a low-grade mistake in his life. Meanwhile, a dragon of the 4th rank is already flying at people fleeing in terror. Tao remains completely relaxed and does not succumb to the general panic that comes from people running on different sides of him. While everyone continues to rush around, and the dragon, with his mouth agape with rage, flies at them, Tao does some calculations in his head, concluding in the end that this creature is really weak. He points his little finger at the dragon with a substance similar to a tiny grain of sand and directs it with great force towards the creepy creature. A shock wave of indescribable force flies near the dragon's muzzle and crashes into the rocks, forming a powerful explosion. In shock and bewilderment, the dragon looks at the consequences of the attack. Clearly impressed by the result and the capabilities of the opponent, the dragon growls and leaves the battlefield. Tao claims that this was not the use of force against a weak opponent. He only frightened the dragon. His philosophy is that as long as negotiations are possible, the world will not be destroyed for the third time. However, his peace-loving Chinese blood can't promise anything. A man in thought, he arrived on Earth less than an hour ago, knows nothing about this place, is not familiar with the situation, so he asks a logical question. How is it possible for him to become a good Heavenly Dao without knowledge? Stamping his foot, Tao decides to stay in the place he likes from the height. The gates of the City of Freedom look rather gloomy, thus hinting that the city does not live up to its name. Hunters of fairies and elves drove through the forest on a cart with their prey, selling it into slavery. The magical creatures looked exhausted, pale, and desperate. Hunters, on the contrary, looked much better, enjoying the success of today's hunt, the prey of which they dream of selling as expensive as possible, having received a huge profit. Dao passed by these people, who noticed him and immediately began to apply all their marketing skills, trying to sell someone. The man noticed the almost dead hearts of fairies and saw the main exhibit, an elf. Silently looking at all this mess, Dao turned around and left, ignoring the stupid shouts of the sellers. He understood that this was a real human trafficking, and the release of those captives would not lead to anything good now, because these inhuman traders would find new ones again and sell them. Tao discovers a shop with slaves and confidently declares that there are still a lot of such shops on the continent. The magic sphere reminds him that he is the Heavenly Dao, who has everything on earth at his disposal. He can easily wish that all the slaves were freed, and the merchants in the world died and their chambers of commerce went bankrupt. Tao continues to insist on his own, claiming that in return for this, something else will come so as not to be worse. Therefore, he decides to first deal with the root of the problem in order to get rid of it forever. In the store, the seller begins to fawn over the hero, trying to push his goods with all politeness and tact. He assures that all slaves are fully prepared and well-trained products that are guaranteed not to escape, even if the master lets her go. Tao decides to ask a couple of questions to a slave girl, from whom he receives quite expected answers. She wants nothing but to be a slave to her master. Dissatisfied with what is happening, Tao asks to take him to the VIP room, where he is seated in a comfortable chair, poured a warm drink and left for a while until exclusive VIP items are brought. Sarcastically wishing good luck in their business, the hero remains alone in the room where he opens the system, and decides for himself that the abolition of slavery will be his first task as a Heavenly Dao. The system asked for a description of the rule that Heavenly Dao wished to add, and he pointed them out. Everyone below the 5th rank and trying to trade people will see a dark silhouette that will begin to seem many times more powerful than the person himself. And when the merchant plans to commit a crime, he will be issued a warning. The hero dispels the doubts of the sphere, saying that it makes no sense for beings above the 5th rank to establish this rule, because they are unlikely to want to trade people and lose their authority. Tao continues to click on the keyboard and enter a description of the rule. So, if the warning goes unheeded and the merchant does not change his mind, then the silhouette will start attacking until the person changes his mind, or until he dies. The process of developing the rules began. It only remained to add a definition, and continuing to quickly run his fingers over the keys, the hero entered them. An act of coercion, when a creature is exposed to the arena of sales not with the help of its will, or with the help of threats from humanoid creatures for the purpose of exchanging goods, profit. But there was only one condition: if the slave became such voluntarily, then there is no problem. The rules are drawn up, and Tao decided to make a preview. Several oppressed goods were led into the VIP room, obediently following the store employee. Everyone froze in amazement, eyes wide in surprise. A sky blue light radiated from the room, spreading in waves around the world. The rules are activated. Tao smiled and turned his gaze to the door of the room. A salesman came in, who prepared 10 of the best goods for the gentleman. The hero examined their sad faces, and then looked again at the satisfied seller, who, trying to please, offered a personal discount. At that moment, a dark shadow formed behind the seller's back. He looked at her in fright, an exact copy of his master, that is, the seller. She watched the salesman with a grin and burning eyes, who screamed at the same moment and backed away. The goods given were no less frightened. Only Tao was completely calm and cool-headed. Therefore, the frightened seller asks whether he sees this creature or not. But Dao naturally saw it. He smiled. With a grin, the hero is interested in how the Chamber of Commerce usually meets its customers. The seller, with horror in his eyes and beads of sweat on his face, claims that they do not have such techniques. It started. Taking a mug with a drink from the saucer, Tao slowly approaches the shadow. The seller tries to warn the gentleman, but he only says that without him they will not be in the best position. Tao pointed his finger at the wall, which had cracks. The salesman looked at her in surprise. In an instant, stones flew in different directions. Dust mixed with sand enveloped the room. A muscular man with a huge sword in his hands flew out of the hole formed in the wall. The girls ran away screaming. The seller looked scared, opening his mouth and making a sound. Tao, with a cup in his hands and a calm expression on his face, holds a man flying with his back. The man opens his eyes. His face is covered with small abrasions, but the seller immediately recognizes him. This is Captain Andre. He is one of the captains of the security service of their Chamber of Commerce, a strong warrior of the 2nd category. Because of his condition, the seller was surprised, not understanding who he could have met to get such a thing. Andre breaks the silence, saying that his opponent has appeared again. He is similar to him, but surpasses his powers many more times. The creature makes its way through the hole formed in the wall. It takes the first step, then the second, and with an angry expression on its face, it heads towards the captain. Everyone now understands that they are not crazy and see what is happening. Captain Andre asks the client to leave the premises for security reasons, as he cannot guarantee it now. But the Heavenly Dao just smiles, drinks from a mug and says that it's not worth worrying. No one in this world can kill him. The enraged captain decides to take matters into his own hands and is once again going into battle with the shadow. She, in turn, is no less belligerent. Two identical faces, two identical figures, completely identical externally, but different internally, fly with great force at each other. There is a fierce battle. The captain is making every effort to stay in the winners. There was no one left next to the opponents. Everyone ran to the corners so that they wouldn't get caught by chance. Tao puts the cup on the table and looks at them. Andre continues to attack the shadow, but it turns out to be stronger and cuts the captain's sword. After the attack, he flies on his back, and the hero catches him again. A shadow hangs over the captain. The latter begs not to approach him, and when he opens his eyes, he sees that the shadow was not going to touch him. She approaches the chained slaves, which frightens them, but at this moment she swings and breaks the chains that bound their freedom. The girls look in surprise at their hands free from shackles. The shop workers also look with less admiring, but also surprised. Captain Andre doesn't understand what's going on here. Tao joins the conversation, who is delighted to say that he has understood what the matter is. The dark silhouette did not intend to kill the captain, but only wanted to save those slaves. Someone is shouting to stop the monsters as soon as possible, and Tao throws up his hands, smiles and leaves the shop. There is complete chaos on the street. Slaves are running away, guards are fighting with dark silhouettes, and well-to-do sellers are shouting that no one should dare to give back. The rich merchant is dissatisfied, rather even angry that his goods are running away. He demands their return, but someone is already waiting for him behind. A shadow, a dark silhouette, a copy of him. The creature has already directed its hands in the direction of this man, who did not have time to understand what was happening, as he immediately receives a strong slap in the face. The man falls to the ground with great force, where an elf runs near him. She examines it and, without hesitation, rushes away to freedom. A wounded man sees a beautiful elf flying away to freedom, and he only cares that his money is disappearing. A leg appears next to this person's face. The elf in the sky turns around and looks in that direction. At the bottom, the Heavenly Dao looks at her. With a smile, he tells her to return home, to freedom. The girl with tears of happiness in her eyes agrees and flies away. Just as Tao was following her with his gaze, another Qingshan girl appears at the same moment, who gets down on one knee and says that she has found the master. The action moves to the tea room of the City of Freedom. Tao picks up a cup of hot drink, brings it to his lips and blows on it to cool it down. The man asks the girl why she followed him if he told her to stay put, to which she performs a submissive gesture and claims that she has sworn to follow her master everywhere. Qingshan asks Dao to let her stay with him and walk side by side. Heavenly Dao looks away in thought and abruptly refuses the girl, saying the word no. Qingshan is at a loss. She clearly did not expect such an answer, so with tears in her eyes she is interested in the reason for the refusal. The girl begs not to leave her, which makes Dao shocked and a little confused. He demands that the girl get up and tries to explain why he doesn't want to take her with him. Heavenly Dao calls her too clingy, a girl who does not know how to control herself at all, and if someone starts to get her, she will simply smash everything around. As a result, it turns out that Qingshan just wants to be with the gentleman, but he calms her down and says that he is afraid that she would not attack him in a dark night in the room. The sphere reassures the gentleman, saying that Qingshan has no guts and she is not capable of more than that. After this phrase, Tao decides to let the girl follow him, but on condition that she behaves meekly, namely, she will not kneel and attract a lot of attention to herself. Qingshan becomes the happiest and agrees to all the conditions, from which Tao looks a little dissatisfied, because he himself fought against slavery, and just got an assistant, almost no different from a slave. The gentleman decides to ask about the incarnations of the Heavenly Dao, and the sphere answers him. Not all incarnations of heaven are girls. Among the 5 incarnations, only Qingshan and Yukishan are girls, and Hun, Dunshan and Huanshan are men. They are loyal to the Tao. The man closes his eyes and says it's so dreary. He calls Qingshan, and she immediately responds. Dao decides to ask about her opinion about the rebels. The girl replies that everyone who opposed the sky is greedy and rude people, and whether it's the first or second worlds, they only do what they kill each other out of greed. Heavenly Dao agrees with her and says that at the beginning of the second cycle, the survivors of the first died before the forces of the 3 worlds were restored, and luring the spiritual forces of the world into their own little world is equivalent to killing chickens. He sums up his speech to the fact that for this reason, He needs to destroy everyone. Kingshan worships the Tao and claims that her heavenly ruler is the eternal ruler of the three worlds. Tao smiles contentedly, but says that it is not a fact that someone more powerful will not appear. The man gets up and leaves because it's time for them to go. Clear weather illuminates the city. Tao monitors the implementation of the new rule by monitors. Kingshan follows the gentleman and asks to answer the question. He allows it and she asks about why these silhouettes are needed, if the Tao can grant untold riches to everyone and get rid of the oppression of a particular race. Tao calls the girl stupid and taps her head with his palm. The man says that then everyone will return to primitive society, and the meaning of the existence of the Heavenly Tao is to maintain a certain order and balance or actions aimed at eliminating the imbalance, but not to do well for everyone. Tao says with a smile that his duty is to open up new ways of development for humanity. After all, he is capable of what others can do, but he has the courage to do what others are incapable of. The man goes ahead and explains that if there is white and black in the world, then nothing should prevail from them. Kingshan raises her hand to her head as a sign that she understands everything. Heavenly Tao looks away from people and says that this is an example. As a precaution, Tao hides a subordinate. The man behind the girl with purple hair sneaks up to her while the poor man tearfully asks for help. That man grabs a bag with her money, and Tao shouts to her that she should keep an eye on her money while giving alms. The girl with purple hair turns around sharply and looks angrily at the thief standing behind her. She hits him with all her might. He just flies away with his mouth open. Tao evaluates the girl's good blow, and she thanks him with a smile on her face. This girl is an AI warrior. She exchanges names with Heavenly Dao and shakes hands as a sign of familiarity. AI is very grateful to the master because otherwise she could have had huge problems. To this, Tao only convinces her that it's nothing and you just need to keep an eye on your things. The girl utters words of gratitude a couple more times and hurries to leave him as she has a lot to do. Tao calls out to the girl and asks her to fulfill one of his requests as an adventurer. Heavenly Dao decides to stick to the position of communicating more with adventurers in order to learn more about this world. He turns to the translucent Kingshan and realizes that he can't show it yet. A hefty bag of coins flies into Ai's hands. Tao says that he is going to the western continent. He will be bored on the way, so he will need company. AI gladly accepts the invitation of the master and asks him to take care of himself. Together they go on. Kingshan wants to chat with Tao, but he only demands to obey and then he will let him out. The heroes are at the stop of the City of Freedom. AI shouts that the horses are ready to go, and then, when Dao approaches her, apologizes for spending so much time preparing. AI whispers in the gentleman's ear that this crew is most suitable in order not to attract attention. The girl introduces her friends with whom she travels. Ahai is a middle-level Taoist and Mary is a nun at an early stage. Heavenly Dao greets him, noting a rather strange combination. Everyone enthusiastically raises their hands and sets off. The sound of horses' hooves is heard. No one talks in the cart. Dao decides to break the silence first by asking about Mistress Mary. He learns that she is a nun from the Holy See of Light. The gentleman examines the girl's attire, which depicts an interesting yellow symbol. The gods of light have no chance against the Heavenly Dao. The man wonders who killed the god of light for the first time. He thinks it's Kingshan. The sphere claims that it may not remember this, because it killed a huge number of people in the first great cycle. Unhappy with their dialogue, Kingshan turns away and chuckles. The driver asks a question about why the gentleman has no guards, to which Tao just smiles, claiming that she will not be stronger than him. Lord Heavenly Dao is very strong, so he doesn't need any guards. Ahai says that he almost does not feel the aura of this gentleman. The violet flame surrounds the whole body of Tao and leads in a thin path to the underworld, where his aura is chained. Heavenly Dao is unhappy that he has been discovered, while AI looks forward in surprise and asks the others to do the same. There are too many people around, so someone thinks that they are refugees, and someone thinks that they are freed slaves from the City of Freedom, who were saved thanks to dark silhouettes. People fled because the silhouettes banned the slave trade and they were left homeless. But how many people died from these dark silhouettes? Mary believes that their methods are too radical, even if the followers of the Holy See are against the slave trade. But AI fully agrees with the dark silhouettes and their methods, since she herself has long wanted to do something similar with these scoundrels selling people. Heavenly Dao decides to summarize the disputes of the satellites and find out whether the methods of dark silhouettes are right or not. Ahai immediately agrees that they are right, because if compared with the long suffering of slaves, this is not so bad. They lost the castle, but gained freedom and a future. AI picks up Ahai's thought and agrees, because now slaves can do anything. Freedom is in their hands. However, Mary notices that those who have already been sold will have a hard time, and she prays for them. Tao asks the question of the meaning of prayers. Mary doesn't quite understand his question. He explains to her and says that the God of Light will not be able to save so many people. This makes Mary jump up and shout that the God of Light is a merciful goddess who will sooner or later help everyone in need. Heavenly Dao with a calm expression denies what the nun said. What she wanted to attack the gentleman, but AI intervenes in time, which calms each of the parties, giving advice on the type, don't be angry and don't say that. Tao turns away, confident in his rightness, and on the edge of the cart sits a translucent Kingshan and pulls the petals out of a pink flower. Ahai, with a nervous laugh, says that the gentleman was a little hasty, but he does not think to give up and asks an answer question about the omnipotence of God. The driver laughs at this, convinced that it is better to learn a couple of spells to protect yourself than to believe in such a thing. AI begins to say that it is better to pray for others, not for yourself, and Tao looks at her. He mentions the thoughts of people from the eastern continent, and then Mary intervenes. She screams that people are still being sacrificed on the eastern continent for the sake of calling rain. The Heavenly Tao is surprised to be interested in the truthfulness of the fact said. He learns that rank 5 people can't cause rain, let alone downpours. The man in his thoughts recalls the Taoists of the 3rd rank, who can create ice talismans, launch them to the clouds, moistening the clouds and accelerating the pouring of rains. Ahai looks at the gentleman with surprise, who, in their opinion, uttered some nonsense, and the girls are already laughing at him. At this moment, Kingshan takes off and tries to attack the laughing people, but Tao stops her, saying that there is nothing to talk about with people who don't even know the basics of physics. It's long past midnight, there's a full moon. AI has brought wood for the fire, and Mary is feeding the horses. Ahai, in turn, recites fire spells to summon him. And now the fire is already warming travelers. Since it is dangerous to walk at night, the heroes stopped. They decided to take turns in 3 on duty so that one Gospelin could sleep peacefully. There are 3 combat rank monsters nearby, and there are also several low-level ones, so it wouldn't be too difficult to destroy the team. Heavenly Dao explores the territory with the help of its technique, assessing the possibilities of travelers. Kingshan approaches him and notifies him about a group of monsters located in the southwest. He listens to her, goes to bed and orders her to just stand by while he sleeps. The girl obeys, and a sign flies into her forehead forbidding any nocturnal approaches to the master, which makes her sad. Ahai and AI are talking under the light of the moon, which prevents the Heavenly Dao from sleeping. Suddenly the guy shouts to everyone to wake up, because something has happened. AI looks down at the leaves of the trees and realizes that the undead squad is coming. Heavenly Dao rises from the couch, yawning, comes to look at what is happening. The master learns that there has been a breakdown and reincarnation is broken. He demands explanations from the sphere and it provides them. At the beginning of the first great cycle, the predecessor of the Heavenly Dao created reincarnation in order to somehow balance yin and yang, while using part of his powers. At the end of the first great cycle, reincarnation was in the hands of demons. Even at the very beginning, everything worked out, and the first world wall was put up to balance everything. But the influx of mixed energy has led to incalculable casualties. After listening to the rest, Tao partially agreed with the method of the former Heavenly Dao. At this time, the skeleton looks at them and pronounces the word. AI is horrified to realize that they are also talking. Mary asks the gentleman about the chances of their death today. Necromancers and death knights of the 3rd rank, as well as countless undead soldiers, were advancing on the travelers. Ahai is horrified. He states the simple truth that if Lord Heavenly Dao is not stronger than these monsters, then they will all die today. Mary throws the cross and falls to her knees, beginning to pray actively. Tao looked at the girl with disgust and turned to the undead. From this, everyone turned their shocked gaze to Tao. A flash of blue color formed around the master, but it did not guarantee anything good for the undead. The Heavenly Dao, surrounded by a blue wave of light, mockingly asks the undead about the desire to fight him. All the undead are considering the hero, being in a little horror and surprise. Tao is convinced that beings devoid of any intelligence will always move blindly because of their instincts. Kingshan, on the other hand, is standing next to the man in combat readiness, offering to deal with the army herself. But in an instant, the skeleton army fell, and their leader could not even attack Dao because of his enormous strength. The gentleman just grinned at this. Heavenly Dao praises the leader of the army for his intelligence and difference from the rest, because having discovered a danger that could easily destroy his entire ethnic group, he did not hesitate to kill all his subordinates himself. Here the sphere intervenes in the conversation and clarifies that in fact this is not a murder, since they have parted with their lives for a very long time. The master only knowingly waves her off with his hand, saying that it is necessary to restore reincarnation as soon as possible. Suddenly, the leader of the undead reaches the fact that he can kill weak people nearby. They understand his intention and move away as far as possible in horror. The undead army runs straight to AI and Ahem, but the guys do not get lost and try to fight off the skeletons on their own. AI uses physical force and Ahem uses fire. Their battle did not last long. A disgruntled Dao immediately intervened, because they are trying to harm his travelers, whom he paid for it. The Heavenly Dao kicks the ground with incredible force, which causes a powerful sound and light wave to fly around. All undead together with their leader in an instant falls apart, unable to attack anymore. From this noble reception, the earth split into two parts, from which the travelers were greatly surprised. While everyone is in a state of shock, the sphere intervenes, recalling Tao's unwillingness to use force. The gentleman replies that only the problem cannot be solved by force, but it is possible to deal with enemies. Heavenly Dao notices some kind of movement in the bushes. He gets the idea that someone is hiding like that, so he demands to come out. A necromancer girl comes out, who is behind the whole performance. She excitedly apologizes for the inconvenience caused. Tao notes the necromancer's politeness and comes closer, saying that the earth is a common territory that does not belong to anyone, but for the future asks to remember that not everyone is so good-natured. The girl thanks for understanding and bows, and together with her, the newly assembled army of skeletons followed her example. Everyone, shocked by what is happening, follows the master, not believing in what is happening and such great powers of the Heavenly Dao. Here, from the end, Mary shouts to the gentleman that if you leave this undead here, she will kill a lot of people. The man turns around and answers after a few seconds. He asks about what Mary expects him to do. She immediately mentions the power of the Heavenly Dao and offers to kill all the undead, because then he will become a hero and savior, and justice will be restored. Heavenly Dao pushes the girl away in irritation and asks again that, in her opinion, weak beings should not exist. Behind the gentleman is a disgruntled Kingshan, with her hands folded in a lock. Mary looks at Tao with a pitiful look. From the point of view of the god of light, the soul is just an insignificant being, and the fact that they are different does not make them bad at all. Everyone should be equal, regardless of gender and race. If you start killing everyone who is weaker, will it be considered the right way? The heroes came to this conclusion while Mary stood with a guilty, downcast face. AI decided to ask about the acquaintance of the Heavenly Dao with the first generation of the god of light. He denies such nonsense, and AI laughs nervously, scratching his head with his right hand. Suddenly AI falls on his knees in front of Tao in gratitude for saving them during their journey, and offers a bag of money. He smiles and says that he does not need any money or companions, since a new task has appeared. Tao's to-do list consisted of 3 unfulfilled items: conduct basic education, find a livelihood, and religious belief, so he decided to stop at the last one. After Tao offered to disperse everyone, he reminded that God really exists, but he believes that this being is very similar to a person, and if you work hard, then you can become one yourself one day. Ahem and AI smile, but Mary is a little excited by such words. In the blink of an eye, Tao says goodbye and immediately disappears, which makes his travelers wonder once again. Under the light of the moon, Tao and Kingshan are in the air. The girl decides to ask a question concerning people and why the gentleman is so willing to help them. He replies with a smile on his face that if he wants to restore the rule of heaven, then mortals are the most important part to this. This is just a small step. Everything is focused on people, and this should be understood. Kingshan understands the master's thought and asks with a smile where they are going now. Heavenly Dao raises his finger up, smiles, and is again surrounded by a blue wave of power and light. The heroes head straight to the underworld. The underground world does not meet the heroes with rainbow colors themselves. Zombies roam everywhere in torn clothes. They are enveloped in a strange green fog. A blue hurricane forms in the sky, and 2 droplets fall out from there, which fall to the ground with great force. Kingshan and Dao come out of them. The latter sarcastically notes the local hospitality. This is the underworld, one of the 3 worlds responsible for death and reincarnation. Heavenly Dao says that here he sees only a dilapidated dump of dead garbage, and the view appears to the eye, where the undead are slowly crawling. Kingshan gets involved and wants to deal with the dead on her own, because this sight, in her opinion, is unworthy of the master's gaze. He immediately calms the girl, saying that the undead are low-ranking creatures devoid of intelligence, so you don't need to waste your strength on them. Kingshan enthusiastically looks at Tao, believing in his rightness, but the sphere decides to ask why this Heavenly Dao is not biased against the undead. The man rolls his eyes and says that the existence of the undead corresponds to the rules of heaven, so they are no different from other races. At the moment, reincarnation is broken and they are all left dead without reason. Tao looks at the black formation in the purple sky, illuminated by lightning. This thing means that the reincarnation of the underworld is broken. Kingshan wonders what they should do, how in an instant they found themselves near this black matter. Heavenly Dao smiles, puts his hand to the black ball and decides that everything needs to be changed. The sphere immediately stops the gentleman. She warns that despite the ability to recreate reincarnation, it will take a lot of effort, so the Tao will be vulnerable for a while. Most likely, he will be able to resist the first blow, but now the second one is able to inflict good such injuries. The main reason is the fact that the Tao cannot be influenced during the construction of reincarnation, otherwise, nothing will work. Here the hero thought for a while, realizing the problem. A smiling Kingshan caught his attention. He grabbed her hand and asked for help, from which she was clearly in shock. Green waves of light surrounded them. The man asked to lend him his strength for a while. Kingshan agreed without any questions, and they got down to business. Tao erected a huge defense for security and proceeded to restore reincarnation. The underworld lit up with a bright light. All the undead raised their heads in surprise. Someone lost his, and after finding it, hoped that this was not the end of an era or rebirth. It was a divine-level warrior Gui Dai. He found out what kind of process was going on and who was doing it, but still did not believe in what was happening. A long time ago, Gui Dai and Yuan Xuan of the ancient Huangshan clan fought for control of reincarnation. The latter received half of the power, but the reincarnation process was disrupted. Since then, the first and last cycle ended like this. Gui Dai had a lot of questions. Why does reincarnation change in this cycle? How did the Heavenly Dao change his appearance? Because before he changed his appearance to a female, then to a male. What now? But with any outcome of the initiative, this skeleton would be only too happy. One of the dead has already wondered who he is, looking at his hands. More and more undead are remembering their past, but they don't understand why they are here in this underground kingdom. Gui Dai understands that they have regained their consciousness, and this only speaks of the enormous power of the Heavenly Dao. She thinks about what she might suffer if she takes at least one extra step, especially when some guys are resurrected. Therefore, he decides to relax and blame everything on the shoulders of the gentleman, falling into the dice. There are still very strong people here, so you should expect spectacles. Scary creatures of the underworld are approaching from different sides. This does not go unnoticed by Kingshan, but Heavenly Dao calms the girl, promising her safety. The man snaps his fingers, and outside the shield there is an exact copy of the Heavenly Dao, guard, who, according to the hero, is exactly able to do his job. Kingshan wonders why the master didn't let her go to stop the creatures, but created a copy. He smiles, referring to his own goals. If the Heavenly Dao allows Kingshan to enter the fray, the world will be destroyed even before he regains reincarnation. Meanwhile, the Dao clone offers the underground creatures a deal. They all calmly return back. But if not and they continue the offensive, then he will destroy them all. Some creatures thought about it, and someone thought it was a bluff and decided to test the powers of the Heavenly Dao clone. The rules of the underworld say everyone can get on the soup. The evil spirits believe that they have more chances for the ass because there are more of them, so they actively began to attack. The dark clone of the Heavenly Dao notes the greed of people, because of which the first and second cycles expected the same deplorable outcome. A creature swoops down on him, but he doesn't even back down, just decides to have fun with them. The underground creatures miss with each blow, having never hit the clone yet, from which he grins and begins to doubt at least some of the abilities of these creatures. Suddenly, Owls appears, possessing the early rank of the Order of Heaven. During the second great cycle, in order to protect his master, he tried to restore his consciousness. After death, he relied on powerful magical power. He is dressed in a purple cloak and holds a bright magic ball in his hands. Owls attracts the attention of a clone who launches a powerful gravitational strike, but this kind of magic is not able to stop the clone of the Heavenly Dao. In an instant, a slot of the middle rank of the Order of Heaven swoops in. The first known killer of the Rat clan, with super fast speed and unsurpassed killing skills, was killed while attempting to attack the elf god. He shouts that this attack is only to delay the clone, and he flies to the blue shield, which contains Kingshan and Heavenly Dao. Kingshan notifies that someone has attacked them, but Heavenly Dao calms the girl, asking her not to worry and not to look. Meanwhile, the clone quickly approaches the rat and grabs it by the head. The killer does not expect such a turn of events and is rapidly flying back to Earth, where the enemy has just been. Ao's looks in fear at the dark clone, who crossed his arms over his chest and warned that one should not go too far with games. But someone from the crowd of underground creatures puts forward the idea of attacking altogether. Then there are more chances. Everything will work out for sure. But they won't succeed. In the same position as before, he expects an attack by creatures that decided to swoop in from all sides. The clone decides to show them absolute strength. His eye lit up brightly with a blue light, and he stretched out his hand with a fist. The monsters stopped and looked at the Heavenly Dao clone in fear. He stretched out his index finger and ordered everyone to kneel, and they immediately fell to the ground, assuming the indicated position. A couple of non-attacking creatures remained in the air. They were clearly shocked by the clone's similar strength, because he was able to put a huge number of underground monsters in just a couple. Loud laughter began to be heard from the darkness, and a skeleton knight, Wanhai, who very much wanted to try out such a force on himself, rode out. All the creatures began to shout over the name of this knight. They say that in the first cycle he was the most powerful knight, and even after death he did not exhaust his strength. And currently he is one of the most powerful beings in the world. Banhai declares that all the treasures of the world should belong to him, and those who will get in his way should not take their heads off. The knight shoots at the clone, to which he only calmly, smiling, confirms the first one's blunder. The knight smiles maliciously, and it doesn't mean anything good. He sends a red whirlwind of power that sweeps away many creatures, and those two creatures in the air are again struck by someone else's power. With all his might, Vahai flies at the clone, but he did not even move from his place, expecting an attack. Arriving, the knight receives a strong punch in the face, from which he is surprised. Blue energy sweeps away everything in its path, including the knight, who is not only amazed, but also does not understand how this is possible, because he has never lost to anyone. The question about the great power was asked by three underground creatures. The totem of the eastern land is Hawa, the ancestor of the corpse sect from the second cycle is Gulao, and the founder of the necromancer sect is Daisy. The clone smiles at their question and realizes that not everyone has escaped yet, so he offers to fight with himself. The creatures sweat on their faces. They begin to refuse, saying that they have no right to fight with him. Their goal is just to find out the name of His Excellency and the purpose of his visit. After learning about this, the clone told me not to ask, but just to wait. The remaining creatures calmly agree with this. Suddenly, a bright light emanating from the shield of the Heavenly Dao illuminates the space. The three remaining creatures, Hova, Gulao and Daisy, are delighted with the beautiful light from above, which they thought they would never reach. They also admired the power of the Heavenly Dao that could restore reincarnation. All the undead, who fell under the radiation of light, began to regain flesh and blood. They become people. Purple flames emanated from their bodies. Many rejoiced at finding their former appearance. Heavenly Dao confidently says that they have finished, and Kingshan looks at the master's creation in delight. Instead of black, the ball with energy acquired delicate blue, purple and red colors. All this was done for the normal functioning of the borders. Someone starts to giggle and claim that the work is worthy of the Heavenly Dao. A girl with a small fang speaks about the ease with which the hero was able to restore reincarnation. The demon lady would like to thank the Heavenly Dao for the work done. Having found a human shell, people rejoice, not believing in what is happening. Souls are being perfected, but no one can make up for broken souls except Heavenly Dao. In the air behind the three remaining creatures of the underworld, a Heavenly Dao with Kingshan appears. They all turn around abruptly and are a little startled to be interested in the truth of his position. Kingshan is annoyed and tries to attack the ignorant who dared to treat the gentleman so rudely, but he immediately calms her down. Heavenly Dao with a smile on his face confirms the assumption of beings and who he is. In disbelief, Daisy pinches Gulao to check whether it's a dream or reality. Fortunately or unfortunately, Gulao was in pain, which means, indeed, this is not a dream. Hova is trembling all over, as she has not yet moved away from the disaster of the second cycle and does not particularly feel the desire to repeat such a thing. A gentleman approaches her to ask about what happened and how many escaped the disaster. Tao looks at Hova searchingly, but she is no longer worried and calmly answers. It turns out that there are enough resources in the secret world, so you can survive the disaster. Tao now realizes how many managed to survive, but he decides to ask about their powers, whether they are able to resist the Heavenly Dao. And he gets his answer. Despite the fact that the underworld is quite sparse, there are more than 100 heavenly forces in it. All of them work together to resist the heavens, but in the end only a dozen supporters survived. Hova dares to ask the man why he arranged this disaster, to which he is slightly worried and talks to the sphere. Tao understands that if he says about his overestimation, they do not check and decides to scare changes in the laws of the underworld. Since the underworld is somehow the pinnacle of existence, it is inevitable that changes in the laws will affect it. But not everyone has the law. Only a limited number of people, creatures see what others have without it, so they start fighting. The Heavenly Dao evenly distributed opportunities between people, but, unfortunately, there are exceptions when the balance of power gradually broke, as it was with the Night Wahai. For example, the broken reincarnation of the underworld. The thing is that the head of the Huangshan Yuan clan and the demon lady began to fight with each other, and in the end, reincarnation was broken. Since then, reincarnation has lost its power, which led to similar consequences. Thus, the Heavenly Dao wants to save the lives of more people, otherwise this world will come to an end. Daisy remembers that in the past they were obsessed with cultivation only, so they didn't pay attention to others. For them, it became a kind of retribution. The Heavenly Dao leads to the idea that regardless of a person's strength, he, in any case, will make a mistake one day, so it is very important to correct it in time, and invites these three underground beings to join themselves. They all look shocked at the man who said all this, and Kingshan reminds him that they are not strong enough and unworthy of his attention. He is convinced of the opposite and believes that their forces are necessary to maintain order, despite the fact that they are powerless against him. But they are among the most powerful in their world. Kingshan just looks at the gentleman with displeasure, but does not say anything. Reincarnation is not perfect. It has a mechanism of natural absorption of souls, so weak souls are more susceptible to absorption. But for beings superior to gods and kings, the power of reincarnation is not so important. This is where the forces of Gulao, Daisy, and Hao will come in handy. They will become messengers of the devil in the organization Afterlife when danger arises. Their task is to transfer the soul of the opponent to the sphere of reincarnation. Heavenly Dao once again asks the creatures if they would like to join the afterlife, while Kingshan behind praises the name invented by the master. Gulao and Daisy stand in a frenzy, not understanding what they should do now. Kingshan closed her eyes and smiled sweetly, showing with all her appearance that they have no right to refuse, otherwise they will be punished in the form of herself. Daisy and Gulao wave their heads together, immediately agreeing, but Hova decides to put forward one condition. From this, Kingshan goes into a rage, not understanding how some totem from the eastern land dares to set conditions, and Tao with his mouth open just looks at the girl in surprise, waiting for her further speech. The man decides to assume the condition and turns out to be right. Hova asks for her wound to be cured. Kingshan angrily looks at everything that is happening, but there is nothing he can do about it. Hova turns around and shows the wound on her back that the demonic wolf Teku left her, and the juice of the tree of life from the forest of elves is needed to heal her. Heavenly Dao thinks about it and realizes that they will have to go to the forests of the elves. The man agrees to the totem condition. Hova happily thanks him in front of her eyes. There is only one question left to solve. Who will become the manager? Here Kingshan gets involved again with his proposal. She suggests Yu Mingshan, believing that she would be the best fit. The gentleman punches it through his system. Yu Mingshan has the reverse heaven rank. She is chained in ice. First, the girl defied the heavens, and then accepted defeat from the sword of the demonic lord of ice. Heavenly Dao wonders if he will be able to resurrect her, and the sphere confirms that his strength is enough for this. At the same moment, they set off to resurrect Yu Mingshan, leaving the underground creatures floating in the air in shock. With great speed, the heroes flew to meet their goal, and then Kingshan decides to ask the gentleman a question. She understood perfectly well that the Dao could heal Hao's wound without visiting the forest of elves, and this really worried her. The gentleman smiles and began to tell her something about completing a mission from a non-player character, so it's supposedly more interesting. But Kingshan still did not understand anything. The question remained in question. Soon the heroes arrived and descended to Earth. A girl, chained in chains, appeared to the eye. This was Yu Mingshan. Tao brings his hand to the girl's face, making sure of her death. Even though she was killed and sealed, her aura is just like that of a living one. It turns out that among the 5 incarnations of heaven, Kingshan's strength is the weakest. But fortunately, the girl did not hear this, as she was standing far away. In order not to waste time, the Heavenly Dao decides to proceed with the resurrection of Yu Mingshan. An alert comes from the Dao system. A reminder, the resurrection of the incarnations of heaven takes away a considerable amount of power from the Heavenly Dao and cannot be returned to the Master again. After the notification, the system again clarifies the desire of the Master in the resurrection of Yu Mingshan. He thinks for a couple of moments and decides to just be careful, transferring 1% of his power to the heavenly incarnation, because this power will not return to him anymore. There are strong bursts of energy in blue all around again. Kingshan is trying to stand on her feet, because even she is torn down by such force. A huge area was illuminated by this strong bluish light, which even reached the underworld and almost demolished Gulao, Daisy, and Hova. They didn't understand why the Heavenly Dao would release so much of its energy, because it could erase boundaries. A huge wave of energy passes through the entire underground world, affecting literally every creature. The Heavenly Dao clutches this 1% of its power in its hands and is called by Kingshan, to which he only justifies himself, since when he released the power, he forgot to direct it in the right direction. The power of the Heavenly Dao is indeed terrifying, but at the same time amazing. A man approaches a dead girl and puts his power into her. From this, all the shackles fall off in an instant, and Yu Mingshan opens his eyes. The girl runs into the gentleman, hugging and rejoicing at his return. Immediately they are separated by Kingshan, dissatisfied with what is happening. Yu Mingshan apologizes, blaming everything on his emotions. The Heavenly Dao rises from the ground, and the girl bows to him and thanks him for the resurrection. So, starting today, Yu Mingshan becomes the managing organization of the afterlife, and its task is to build the afterlife and ensure the safety of reincarnation. For the girl, this task becomes the whole meaning of her existence, and the sphere again finds fault with the formulation of the Heavenly Dao, to which he dismisses her. It immediately becomes noticeable that the character of both girls is different, but if the gentleman lets another one near him, he will go crazy. Kingshan pouted her lips, turned away for a long time and did not look at them. But Yu Mingshan decides to ask if the master will stay in the underworld, but is refused since there are plenty of other things and worries. Heavenly Dao calms the heavenly incarnation, telling him to behave more confidently. Besides, he has already restored reincarnation in the underworld. Yu Mingshan only needs to become the mistress of the underworld. The girl understood everything. Tao is smiling and only one Kingshan is dissatisfied again. Suddenly, a message from Yu Mingshan arrives for all the inhabitants of the underworld. Listen carefully, all those who now live in the underworld. I am one of the incarnations of heaven, Yu Mingshan. From now on I will manage the underworld, as well as help the Heavenly Dao in managing the entire earth. Now you will work for the benefit of the Heavenly Dao, and the above-mentioned beings will be responsible for the construction work. Powerful beings will become messengers of the devil, will go for souls to lead them to reincarnation, and just try to disobey. You will immediately become an enemy of the Heavenly Dao. Many listened, being in shock, and someone was immediately dissatisfied with the turn of these events. Heavenly Dao noted her extraordinary abilities in management, and then learned from the sphere that she used to be the mistress of the clan. The man is convinced that there will be no problems if he leaves the afterlife in the hands of Yu Mingshan. Clasping her hands and drawing her eyebrows together, a disgruntled Kingshan looked at the girl standing on the cliff of the mountain. But he immediately calms down and asks the gentleman where their path now lies. As a result, the heroes head to the Forest of Elves. The Forest of Elves is a rather more welcoming, bright and beautiful place, unlike the underworld. Here the heroes meet dense green vegetation, which cannot but rejoice. Prison carts full of elves are moving again. Once again, merchants are trying to cash in on living creatures, trying to sell them as dearly as possible. Beautiful elves sit sadly in dungeons and can't do anything. But suddenly someone appears from the bushes. This is none other than the commander of the group of abductors from the Earth Dragon, a knight of the 3rd rank, Sabai. He is holding a sharpened sword in his hands, and he is sitting astride a huge green dragon that does not look friendly. With him, people are not afraid of anyone who could stop them. A dark silhouette of Sabai appears out of nowhere, hostile to human hunters because of the rule of the Heavenly Dao. The elf kidnappers, in obvious shock, with their mouths open and without the slightest understanding of what is happening, take out their swords, again not realizing that it is useless. The silhouette points a finger at people, and Sabai regards this gesture as a desire to capture their prey. The clone pulls out a sword, which makes the hunters laugh, but the first one is clearly not joking. He draws some kind of symbol on the ground, which causes a dragon of the 5th rank, which makes Sabai very surprised and even scared. Seeing the shadow of the knight on the dragon approaching, the elves began to rejoice at the approaching salvation. Only they thought it was the elf lord who heard their pleas, except for one girl sitting furthest away. It was she who was confused by the dark silhouette of the savior, because if it was the elf king, he would have sent a white elf angel. Meanwhile, Sabai was still trying to talk to him, assuring him of his fearlessness in front of the dark silhouette. But he just looked at the man without emotion and crossed 2 fingers, and then angrily squeezed his hand, saying that he needed everyone. In a rage, Sabai shouts at the shadow, dissatisfied with the fact that he spent so much effort on catching all his prey. And then some knight of the 5th rank appears and tries to take all the elves from him. The man shouts that this silhouette is just a fake, since his dragon was not afraid of him. Then they, hunters, should not be afraid. They all ran to attack the Dark Knight. A blue flame bursts out of the dragon's mouth and it goes straight at the hunters. Everyone who got under the action of the flame immediately falls dead. Sabai notices this, being in great confusion, watching how his hunter warriors were defeated too quickly and easily by one Dark Knight. When everyone was down, the silhouette went to Sabai on the dragon, and he just plaintively prayed that they would not approach him. But the dark silhouette followed other ghouls, and he had just freed these other ghouls from the wooden bars by cutting them with a huge sword. The elves began to thank their savior, as at that time Sabai decided to take advantage of the moment while the doppelganger turned his back on him. Apparently, imagining himself the strongest and most powerful, he tried to stab in the back, but it was not there. The elf tried to warn about the attack, but it was not necessary. Throwing the sword, without even turning around, the dark silhouette hits the target directly and kills his weak opponent who dared to attack in the back. The leader died, and when everyone found out about it, they immediately ran in different directions, shouting to everyone to escape from the monster. Suddenly, one of the escapees gets an arrow right in the forehead, and this he received a gift from the 3rd squad of the Legion of Guardians, who arrived to help his fellow refugees. An elf with a bow and a guy standing next to her noticed a Dark Knight who saved their comrades and defeated all the kidnappers. At this time, another elf grabs the hunter and threatens to sell him to the nobles, for which an arrow flies to his head from his own silhouette at the same moment. Noticing this, the elves began to prepare for battle, preparing bows, but the newly rescued elf covers the silhouette, trying to prevent a battle. Everyone is looking at her without understanding such actions and waiting for an explanation. According to her explanations, it was clear that this silhouette had done nothing wrong, as it brings justice to the world. Apparently, the main elf did not quite understand the essence of the girl's thoughts, so she asked what it all meant. The silhouette of an elf unties the hands of the chained elves, and meanwhile the leader of the elves and the girl who defended this silhouette are talking. It explains the essence of their existence. Silhouettes have one feature: they attack only those who intend to sell another person. This is true for both kidnappers and keepers. Therefore, until he feels the intention of selling, he will not attack. The main elf understands what the matter is and orders not to take anyone with her. The girls exchange glances and look at the silhouette, which successfully disappears into thin air. And the rescued elf thanks this mysterious stranger who saved her life. The narrative is transferred to our main characters. Suddenly, the Heavenly Dao sneezes. From this, Kingshan begins to worry, wondering about his health. He blames everything on the fact that something got into his nose and continues to fly on. Here they fly over the site of a recent clash of silhouettes and merchants. Kingshan notices that something has happened down there, and Tao just smiles, realizing that these are the actions of the law he previously adopted. Heavenly Dao looks around and smiles, noticing the arrival of several green lights that hit the ground and turn into messengers of the devil. The elves look at what is happening in surprise, and souls fly out of the merchants, who are immediately chained by the newly arrived messengers of the devil. They tied the souls on a leash and pulled them into the afterlife. All this action did not take long. The elf looked at it all in surprise until the leader called her to go back to Kale. The girl agrees and understands that only she saw what was happening to the souls of the merchants just now. But the transition to the afterlife is working successfully. Heavenly Dao looks at this, and Kingshan praises his success in business. He smiles, but asks not to change the subject and not to forget the purpose of their visit here. After all, their next destination is the capital of the elves, the city of life, Kale. Kale is a beautiful sunny city. All the rescued refugees were brought here and now its rules are explained to them. From now on, all those rescued will be responsible for the cleanliness of the city, since elves do not raise lazy people. They shouted loudly in agreement with the rules of the city. The elf was handed a broom. She looked at the tall, powerful tree and realized with joy that she had finally returned home. While she was sweeping, a cart passed by her with some important beings who had stopped by the city. The carriage stops and Heavenly Dao and Kingshan get out of it. The first one notes a huge number of elves, so he asks the girl to show her ears to blend in with the crowd. While the heroes were standing, an interesting dialogue between a noble elf and his maid was heard behind them, in which the first one asks about the lower races and how many minerals they have extracted for today. These people passed by without giving a single poor man a coin. Heavenly Dao, although he had nothing against the aristocracy, but the gap between the rich and poor strata of the population oppressed him. Kingshan looks around the area, and the sphere again tries to remind the master that he can wipe out the entire aristocracy from the face of the earth in an instant if he wants. Heavenly Dao again waves away the pesky sphere, and rolls his eyes. To achieve equality, the deprived must fight themselves, since the intervention of third parties will only turn them from victims into regular criminals. For clever thoughts and inflexibility of solving problems by force, the sphere praises the Heavenly Dao, for which he only smiles, considering praise as a compliment. Unexpectedly, the gentleman is interested in the world tree, whose condition is directly related to the elven god. When Kingshan found out that the master wanted to find the elven god, he immediately offered to burn the tree so that the girl would immediately show up. Heavenly Dao stops the overly active Kingshan and explains to her that he just wants to talk, not fight. The girl gets a light blow to the forehead with her finger, but this is enough to calm down a little. Kingshan says that the elven goddess was a rebel in the second cycle, and therefore there is nothing to talk about with her. Heavenly Dao listens to the hysterical Kingshan and declares that it is even more important to talk to her, because he wants to understand what the rebels are thinking. Kingshan holds onto his bruised forehead and listens to the master. He, in turn, utters wise thoughts, coming to the conclusion that those who have few enemies, who have many friends, and therefore they should acquire as many allies as possible. Kingshan only agrees with his master's wisdom. Suddenly, everyone starts running to the sides, and someone from afar shouts to get out of the way. This is the perspicacious elven princess Yusha, who is in the middle of the third rank, rushing on her dragon. Yusha flies straight at Tao, who was standing and standing, not going to move to the side. The girl warned more than once, and who wanted to, he ran away. The princess drives up to the gentleman and immediately passes through him, as if the man was not there. Heavenly Dao finds out who this girl from the sphere was and decides that later it will be necessary to deal with the upbringing of the children of the nobility, because she behaves impermissibly. Suddenly, a light crown with a bright green glow in the hair runs by very quickly. The girl runs to her grandfather, who does not hear the approach of the crazy princess. She grabs him and pulls him aside for protection, and Yusha only shouts that any rabble get out of her way because she warned. The elf is interested in the condition of the grandfather, to which he calmly thanks the savior. The girl does not understand how elves can be like that. Suddenly there are claps. This Heavenly Dao applauds the elf and praises her for how kind she is for feudal society. The girl turns around and asks who this man is. He appears to be an ordinary passerby and asks his grandfather how rude the elf princess is. It turns out that all the nobility is like that. The fate of the elves was predetermined from birth. Golden and Moon elves are members of the royal family. Sea and forest elves are artisans. Gray and black, like this grandfather, can only be slaves. The girl is dissatisfied with the unfairness of what is happening. Believing that everything should not be like this, it is impossible to determine the fate of a person by his birth. She didn't understand why Grandpa was saying that. And these are just conclusions due to life expectancy. Gray elves live only 1,000 years, but golden elves more than 5,000 years. The price of their high life expectancy is low fertility. Therefore, the gods have long determined their fate and they can only obey. Heavenly Dao learns that the stronger the being, the lower the chances of having offspring, so he is interested in his ability to have a child. As a result, it turns out that everything depends on whether he wants to have a child himself or for someone else to have one. While Dao was defending himself from Kingshan, Grandpa said goodbye to the girl who saved his life and set off on his way. The elf understands that this should not happen. All this injustice, and at this moment the Heavenly Dao approaches her and remembers her years of rule, because then the elves were different. The girl froze in shock. She has just been named Lulusha, the former mother and goddess of the elves. She is the rebel who went against heaven. Suddenly, a green light illuminated the space and Lulusha immediately asked who this gentleman was. He only grinned, hinting that he was the same Heavenly Dao. The goddess did not believe him. Then the Lord decided to explain otherwise. He snapped his fingers, which formed a huge blue shield that does not allow magic to be used inside him. This is what Lulusha felt when she tried to use her powers. Heavenly Dao approaches the girl and grabs her chin. He looks into her eyes and asks if she believes him now. Heavenly Dao moved to Lulusha too quickly that she didn't even realize when he did it. The girl pulled away from the man, abruptly throwing her hand off her face. She decided to act. Immediately gathers all his strength into a fist and directs a blow at the master, but it was not there. Kingshan appears, who hits the elf goddess with all the swing of her leg, that she flies away a few meters. The incarnation of heaven is in anger. It does not understand how Lulusha can behave like this with a master. Since the goddess's soul has just begun to recover, and her strength is now barely reaching the top of the 5th rank, she needs to be saved. The girl forms a staff in her hands, and there are magic symbols on the ground to invoke the movement spell. And it seems that everything worked out for her. She moved. However, Lulusha collided with the Heavenly Dao. It is sealed into a powerful shield built by the master, so the move spell did not work. From a strong shock wave, the girl falls to the ground, which forms a small hole. She can't believe her teleportation ability doesn't work here. Lulusha does not have time to relax as Kingshin jumps up to her, who immediately grabs her and ties her hands behind her back. Heavenly Dao approaches, smiles and asks the defender to let the rebel go. Even the words about who Lulusha is do not stop Kingshin from following the master's orders. She dismisses the goddess with displeasure, and the man asks the latter if she believes in his status as a Heavenly Dao. Lulusha thinks, glancing at the guy, and he grabs her by the shoulder and convinces her that he just wants to ask a couple of questions and nothing more. The goddess looks contemptuously at the hand on her shoulder and realizes that in this situation, even Dongfeng Heishin would not be able to escape, so she can only cooperate. Lulusha agrees to the questions, and for this correct choice, the Heavenly Dao praises the goddess. Kingshin is still dissatisfied with what is happening. The first question of the gentleman was to find out what the plan of the rebels consists of, to which the goddess refuses and does not answer, as she allegedly does not know their plan herself, even if she is a member of the rebels of the second cycle, but does not know if they have a plan against heaven in the third calendar. From the answer of the goddess, Kingshin is in anger and is going to bite her, but the Heavenly Dao stops the aggressive person and asks to be honest. As a result, it turns out that Lulusha, indeed, may not know anything, since the elven gods are considered to have average strength, so it's normal that she doesn't know anything. Kingshin calmed down and pondered over her master's words. The second question of the Heavenly Dao was to find out the reason for the elf goddess's hatred of heaven. The girl grins at what she has heard, because the answer seems to her the simplest and most banal. In the first cycle, she was a goddess born with a world tree. Together with the world tree, they protect the birth and growth of elves. Prosperity and happiness still lives in the memory of the goddess. But at the end of the first cycle, she saw the catastrophe with her own eyes. Lulusha barely survived. She had one breath left, and the peaceful tree turned back into a seed. She angrily darted a glance at the guy and once again asked the question asked to her, which, in her opinion, made no sense. In his defense, Heavenly Dao recalled that it was the fault of the past Dao, and it was his destruction that led to the incitement of this hatred. The hero asked the last question to find out about the most important thing in the heart of the goddess. She looked askance with her own and green eyes at the guy, asked again, and then thought for a while. Lulusha just wanted to live and protect her people forever. She pronounced her main task of life with her hand on her heart, which indicates the sincerity of her intentions. Heavenly Dao calls her a protector, grins and asks about the goddess's capabilities. Kingshin continues to nag her with his angry gaze. From the impudent question of Mr. Lulusha, she flares up sharply and begins to get angry, not understanding in what sense he is talking to her. And he only relies on facts that speak for themselves. The man snaps his fingers and asks to face the truth. They are instantly transported to the elven forest mine. Dark, frightening space meets the eyes of the heroes. In the distance, slaves work in the form of thin shadows. The goddess of the elves covers her nose from an unpleasant smell and wonders where they are. Heavenly Dao reports that this place is called a good job for earning money. Lulusha is indignant when she sees her kinsman being slapped on the back for being slow. Slaves are threatened with corporal punishment if they do not hurry and are late with delivery. The goddess's eyes begin to burn with green flames in anger. She does not understand how the elves dare to treat their own people like that. Heavenly Dao cannot believe that. It turns out, he can only stop the slave trade, and since this is slavery, the dark silhouette will not appear, and accidentally utters all his thoughts aloud. After hearing the man's words and asking about the dark silhouette, Lulusha realizes that those saviors are silhouettes the work of the Heavenly Dao. She is at a loss, because she does not understand when he became so kind. Since the goal is to save slaves, the goddess has a quite logical question why this force should not be applied to pure slavery. Heavenly Dao exhales and says that the goddess has misunderstood something, so he begins to explain everything to her. Since slaves appear only because of the slave trade, but criminals and prisoners are also slaves. In order not to save the latter, exactly such a rule as theirs was invented. It prevents the appearance of slaves. Enraged, Lulusha decides to speak out and name the thing she hates most in the slave trade: murder, harassment, oppression. And all this was decided by the leader of the Heavenly Dao race. The mother goddess of the elves lowers her head below, and her fists are clenched to horror. Suddenly, the guy again attracts the attention of the goddess, grabbing her chin and telling her not to shift all the responsibility to him. Lulusha does not understand why, Having such great power to change everything and save a huge number of people, the Heavenly Dao does not do this. He asks the goddess to think about what she did when the Heavenly Dao wanted to change everything. But at that time the underground kingdom was devastated. Why is heaven the world with the most resources? And why was reincarnation disrupted? The goddess shrinks and screams that they just wanted to live normally, so they tried to take away the power of heaven. All the elves, even the nobility, were just looking for a better life, oppressing their own kind. Confused, Lulusha shouts that what the master said is not true, and the whole point is that he wants to take away the power of all beings to become stronger, so they must resist, otherwise the Heavenly Dao will simply kill them all. The hero grins at what the goddess says, because the power of the Heavenly Dao comes from all beings, so the death of all beings weakens the power of the Heavenly Dao. Therefore, the speech of Luludia does not make sense. She looks up at the man in confusion, who continues to ask a lot of questions, while tormenting the girl. Which is why she gives up and just grabs her head, because she does not know the answers to the questions. The mother goddess of the elves does not know. Heavenly Dao understands this, but also understands that she wants to know the answers to all the questions asked, so she smiles and shows her a sphere in the form of the earth. The skeleton of a dead man is reflected in the eyes of the goddess.